Let the record show here. Good morning, everyone. Let the record show. I was willing to do an hour on the San Antonio Brahmas starting quarterback situation here. Had I needed to, but we have lots of breaking news here coming out today. XFL 2024 season, season 2 confirmed. We'll get to all of that. We have a special guest, Paul Reeths, standing by. First off, I'll bring in my co-host here for the morning show, Andrew Murray. I want to congratulate, before we get into the show, Juwan Pass, starting quarterback for the San Antonio Brahmas with the win this weekend against the Arlington Renegades. Juwan Pass. Andrew Murray, you got to see the Godkirk play in Arlington this weekend. How are you doing, sir?
All right, I have to come off the top rope for this one. It's good. I'm semi-fresh off the plane from Arlington. I was there this weekend, so I got to see both of them in person. As to their performances, we'll get into that later, but it was interesting for sure.
We'll get into all that. I'm just checking the feed here, making sure people are logging in here. And then we have Paul Reeths standing by. The big news we'll get into here, US XFL season 2 confirmed. We'll bring in Paul. Paul, you're our Jen Hale today. Paul Reeths, how are you doing, sir?
I'm well. How about you, Reed?
We're good. I appreciate you. Andrew wasn't sure if he was going to be making it back with his, flights and if he was going to teach anything. So we have Paul Reeths here. Paul, first off, just how are you doing? And then we'll get into all the breaking news here.
Things are well here. I'm enjoying the XFL season. It's just fun having football this time of year.
It's good. And you've been now, I will say, I was a little down this weekend, watching the games. I'm flipping back and forth. I'm watching the Kraken. We have the 7-2 win over the Nashville Predators. That was exciting. Little down. The game yesterday wasn't great. A little poo-pooey. And then just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. And we have the USA Today article, XFL season 2. We're coming at it. Paul, A to F right now on the season. Then we'll get into the breaking news.
I'm going to give them a B-. I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, especially in regards to attendance, is that actions have consequence. So does inaction. We had the XFL announce that it was coming back for 2023 season, and then we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited for the markets to be named. We waited then for a schedule to come out, probably because of the Vegas situation. But regardless, I think what we're seeing is that all that lost lead time had a consequence. So, and I know a lot of fans are jumping on the attendance, and it hasn't been great in some places. It's been much, much better in other places. But I think that the league could have mitigated a lot of that by having their ducks in a row a lot sooner. Now, what I have liked is the XFL rule set, and especially the pace of play has made, in my opinion, for some really compelling games.
It's big. Yeah, I think the quality of play, and we'll get into, I think, mixed results here this weekend in terms of some of the games. Let's bring this up here. We have from USA Today. This was Tom. My text is so small. Tom Schad on here. I'll pull this up. I was scared. Our StreamYard was showing we had 0 viewers on the stream, but I checked on YouTube. We very much do not. But I was like, did I set the link to private today? What's going on? We have Tom Schad here talking with Dany Garcia and The Rock. Paul, had you seen this article, or is this the first time that's come across? It just came out this morning. Breaking news.
I just had it mentioned to me within the last hour.
Perfect. So Tom's here sitting down. Dany Garcia called this a milestone with 3 Week 6 games over the weekend. The latest iteration of the XFL officially crossed the halfway point while also surpassing the point of the 2020 version. This is an interesting quote. I want to get both your guys' thoughts on this. We'll kind of go through the article, and then we'll talk through the other games and stuff, but this is exciting right now. The monkey is off our back, Garcia told USA Today Sports on Friday. We are now creating our history, a history that will not be compared to what happened in the past, but our XFL history. Paul, you're the historian. We'll go to Paul. We'll get Andy's thoughts. Paul, what do you make of this? We don't want to be compared to the XFL 2020 anymore. Stop asking us.
So, complete the championship game. Then let's offer some pats on the back. This is what the USFL was able to do last year. Complete its season. XFL, I think, is well on its way. This is certainly a great sign to have, yes, we're coming back next year, rather than, oh, we can't pay people this week, but everything's going to be fine, guys. Way better situation than that. So they have surpassed, the 2020 XFL, but the real milestone is completing that championship game.
Andy, we have talked a lot on the podcast about this, about, we want to buy XFL 2020, but we're buying the house, but we're knocking it down. No emotions left over here. What do you make of this quote? I think this is an interesting quote. I mean, I get the monkey off our back. Like, okay, we've made it further than we ever made it in 2020, but we don't want to be compared anymore. This is our history, damn it.
I think Dwayne has been waiting 6 weeks to use that quote. He's had it in his back pocket the entire time. He could not wait for week 6 to roll around just so he could throw that down, just as an affirmation, for the fact that this season has finally gotten past the midway point, which everyone knew, everyone had in the back of their heads since the last time. Even after week 5, I think our group chat, jokingly said, well, this is when the aliens start coming down, and the next great tragedy happens, and it's going to stop the season, because that was the last thing that was in our minds as spring football fans and as XFL fans, is that idea of, well, okay, the season could just suddenly halt again, because it's almost like PTSD, right? That's sort of part of it. So I understand the quote. It is funny to say that, and I do agree with Paul. There needs to be the full season play out, and there needs to be the championship game before you really start affirming to your base, I suppose, that this is going to be going into season 2. But it is nice that they are already starting to think about that in terms of that. And I think they already were anyways. They've talked about this being a long-term process. This is not new in terms of their planning stages or in terms of their mindset in terms of running the league. But as far as the season goes, yes, they need to get to the second half, as it were. And there's still a month and a half left of that.
I think that I think for the most part, unless you're Marshall Ferguson, Michael Ball, or just, cowards that hide behind the avatars on Twitter, I think you expected, XFL season. I think we could expected a championship game, right? And I've had CFL people messaging me like, Reed, what do you think of this? And the ratings, I said, I really think they're invested. I mean, Paul, was there anything in this world short of aliens that you really thought, like, we're not at least completing this season?
No, I think that there would be way too much egg on the face. It seemed like they had adequate capital put forth to get through one season. So I didn't really see that as a tremendous possibility, which is really weird when you're talking about alternative football, that the greater chance would be completing the season than collapsing sometime during the season.
Yeah, kind of. So we have here, and they're talking the ratings. They're down. XFL viewership is down 64% over the same 5-week period. Attendance is down 21%. I can tell you, as a content creator, that I think XFL interest is down a little bit right now. Andy, thoughts on that? We'll get Paul. Just, it's just kind of the same old story, but we'll get to some more exciting quotes here.
I think it's interesting. Now, again, like I mentioned, I went to the Arlington game yesterday, which, for the record, was actually the highest attendance for the entire season. It was 12,000. So, and I think the weather had a lot to do with that. It was 80 degrees and it was sunny. It was perfect. It was one of the best. It was the best weather day I've had all year personally. It was the first time I'd worn shorts all year. So if that means anything, but I saw, the TV schedule, I think, was more accommodable. I saw a lot of families, saw a lot of children at this game. That was a big deal. We talked about that ad nauseum last week about the TV schedule and how uncomfortable it was for some of these people, because you can't just bring small children to a game at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night. So that, I think, was a big factor in that as well. But overall, the feeling I get is that, yes, there are some people, I think, that are aware of the history of the league from 2020, but I also think there's a lot of newcomers. There's people that are just now learning about this and understanding that, A, this is back, and B, this is a new iteration of the league. And so I think with that, you're trying to sort of combine all of these fan bases, or these people who are coming at it from different angles, and trying to get them all into the same page. I do think it was interesting that, again, I saw some people with Renegade shirts, but I didn't see a lot of fanfare, a lot of paraphernalia in general, unless people made their own custom stuff, because, again, there's no jerseys for sale. So I saw a lot of people wearing random jerseys. Like I saw Justin Herbert's jersey 2 times yesterday, probably because it's just light blue. It's powder blue. I'm sorry. I didn't wear one. Hey, I didn't wear one. I thought about it. I didn't wear one, but I saw 2 people wearing that. I saw people wearing other teams' jerseys, obviously a lot of Cowboy fans. Obviously, there's a lot of people with other paraphernalia from other leagues. other leagues and other sports. So that was interesting to me. And I think that's part of the aspect here is that maybe people can't show their full patriotism yet. And that unless people had the jerseys from the last league, which some people do, not everyone does. And so that's another factor in it as well. It's interesting. It was interesting to me to see how many like combined fan bases from now and then the past 3 years were there. And I think it's still fluctuating, to be honest. And that's maybe why there's not that solid number that people expected this second time around.
I think I have 4 XFL 2020 jerseys. I think I have 2 authentic, a replica. I think I kept one in the bag because I said this is going to be worse than one day. Paul's going to come back on the show in a couple weeks here. We'll get Paul long form deep dive, but I do want to get your thoughts because we've obviously did the whole USFL, the attendance. Your thoughts? We're down, like I said here, 21% attendance figures, 64% TV. Is this better, worse than Birmingham? I mean, what did we expect here?
Oh, I think just having fans in the stands has been so much better. It adds so much more life to the broadcast. And really, that's what both the USFL and the XFL are primarily, are broadcast products. And I do think that even the small crowds that we've seen at Cashman Field, for instance, bring some life, bring another thing for the camera to focus on that adds to those broadcasts. So I in front of the crowds, hands down, way better. When you look at comparing these broadcast numbers, comparing the attendance, I dealt with the attendance a little bit earlier. I think the lack of lead time, we've seen that borne out in the attendance struggles in some places quite heavily. And I think that it's just that lead time of selling tickets, of selling yourself to the community, that the XFL, unfortunately, they didn't take full advantage of the time that they may have had there. Ratings, I was just going to say with the ratings in the 3 years, we've only seen more splintering in the media market. And there's heavy competition right now with March Madness. So not surprised at all. Let's see what happens going forward here. The XFL has taken some kind of different strategies to try to work around March Madness. Maybe next year they don't do those same things. Maybe not so much late Thursday games or Monday night games. They're going to have to put an emphasis on those ratings. And so, to a degree, what we might be seeing is a strategy being tried out that just isn't working particularly well.
I went to Gonzaga, did not realize. I mean, I am so out of it right now. I'm like, I'm in XFL, I'm in Kraken. Turn on after the Vipers game on Saturday. I turned on Gonzaga, and it was the biggest ass whooping I've ever seen. And I've seen our team take some ass whoopings in my time here after I graduated. I lived through Adam Morrison. Watched the game, him crying on the floor. I saw the Adidas commercial, all that. I texted my buddies. First, I said, I didn't realize the game was on. They said, how did you graduate from this school? And then I said, this is absolutely the biggest ass kicking I've ever seen. Talking ratings here, and we'll go to Andy, then Paul. Garcia and Johnson said, they know the numbers. They do not view the old version of the league as a fair measuring stick. I think it's not really apples to apples, Johnson said. However, we do keep an eye on these things, and you have to. Again, quit asking us about before. We don't want to talk about it.
It's going to keep happening. I'm sorry. Until they surpass the ratings, it's going to happen. It's the same thing with USFL. I mean, it's the first iteration to the second iteration. I know there's a bigger gap in time for that, and that circumstances have changed drastically since that point, but I still feel the same way about that league. People still make those comparisons back and forth as if it's the same situation, it's the same scenario, and it's the same expectations. I think that's just when people have that idea in their heads of this is what it was like last time, I think they're going to stick to that. That's just how it is. I do think it's important to keep that in mind when it comes to maybe the standard that the league could shoot for eventually, but as we've seen, and just the feeling that I get just even from the game that I attended yesterday and from talking to my friend all weekend, who was trying to explain all of the rules and all of the aspects of the league, which a lot of it he liked, actually. He was really interested in the rules. He was very fascinated by the kickoff rule, the conversion attempts, the double pass. He absolutely loved the idea of the double pass. And trying to convince people of the idea because there's still a lot of buildup. There's a lot of time being allocated to this slow rampway, which was not the case last time. It was much more like, bam, here it is. This is Vince's idea. They're running full speed at immediately. And that was not the case here, obviously. And we knew that going in. And yet still, I think there's the expectation because of what it was like 3 years ago. And by the way, I just want to say before I toss back to you, don't crucify me, but at halftime, I was actually paying more attention to March Madness myself because San Diego State has had a historic season. This is the best season in all of its history. They've never been to the Elite Eight, and they had never been to the Final Four. I watched the last 3 minutes of the game against Creighton. It was terrifying. But my friend at one point were simultaneously watching that game on my phone and then kind of half paying attention to the end of the half and the halftime because it was just so thrilling and it was a huge season. So yeah, that's the thing. March Madness is going to be a huge distracting point too. I mean, we all knew that. We didn't get that answer last time. We had no idea because March Madness didn't happen. So now you have that historical perspective. Now they can sort of work off those numbers. That was not the case last time. We're getting new research, essentially. We're going into untreaded water, so it's really hard to base it off that as well.
Well, I think you and a friend of the show now, Stormy Bonatoni, I think she was tweeting about San Diego State as well. I thought, oh man, she was watching it. Paul, we have the quote here. They're talking about the ratings. Distribution's important. It's one piece of an elegant puzzle that includes what we're doing digitally, who we're reaching, making traction. They're talking about digital engagement numbers. They're making traction, and that's how we're winning. Called attention to the second half shift of the TV schedule. What do you make of that? I mean, again, at the end of the day, digital impressions, they tweeted, I think it was last week, we had 400 million views on XFL related platforms. I thought, are we included in that number? Like XFL, what do you make of this digital reach here that don't talk about TV ratings?
And it's that's kind of a tough thing to quantify. You can throw out a number like 4 million. Well, what does that really mean? Web page views or whatever. It's kind of a soft metric to gauge interest. But eventually you need those soft metrics to become hard metrics, which are viewers, which are the other piece that we haven't talked about is the streaming piece. Are there hundreds of thousands of people tuning in on ESPN Plus? Probably not. But is it driving some ESPN Plus subscriptions, which is a hard number that Disney can look at and say, hey, this is helping us. Those are the things that we don't know. So that can be both a soft and a hard thing. But to me, the real proof is moving forward, that it's enough of an encouragement to them that they are moving forward with all of this.
Andy, they say here, we've been very much in the pocket of understanding of where our ratings would be. This is Dany. We understood the challenges that would happen all the way through week 5. And as we get to week 6 and the later half of the schedule, we knew where it would open up. So we're really pleased, really, really pleased. I think, I believe, was it in Mark's article today where he was sharing about this, talking that, obviously a shift more to the network games. Do you have anything to add to this? And then I think we finally have the quote here where the season's coming back.
My first reaction was it was a bit of corporate speak, but I do think one point that one of your contributors talked about, or you may have spoken with him last weekend in your podcast, was about how Dwayne, like a few weeks ago, remember when Dwayne Johnson was talking about the ratings on FX? I think it was for the Seattle game, and he said, this isn't exactly where we want, but we're building on this. It's kind of the same mentality here. I think that's been the permeating idea, as opposed to the continuous sort of, I don't want to say cover up, but a lot of people who take those ratings would say, no, these are great. Look, this is why these are great. And I don't think that is the same idea here. This is not the idea of like, oh, these are fantastic for XYZ reasons in this time slot at this time for whatever reason. Like I heard that explanation 1.5 million times about a Friday night game on FS1 last year. That's not the same. It's not the same. And I think that's something that is not, there's a little bit more grounded reality in that observation from Dany Garcia and Dwayne Johnson. So I'm glad that there's at least a little bit more, there's a little bit more reality mixed in here with this observation. And that's true. I think it's hard for fans to hear that, or for people who are curious about the league's long-term prospects to hear that, because they look at the hard numbers as Paul was referring to and just saying, well, but this is what it is. Isn't that a problem? And I get it. I understand that. But I agree with him as well. I wonder about the ESPN subscriptions. I will say this. I I personally locked into it when the CFL season was around because I wanted to watch CFL football. I locked in the ESPN. That was the most efficient way for me to watch CFL games last year because it wasn't always on ESPN2 or ESPN News of all things. So that is something that has to be accounted for. I don't know if we'll ever get those numbers. Obviously, that's very much corporate knowledge, but that is something that has to be looked into. I agree.
I don't know if either of you tracked the whole Black Adam saga of it all, but I will say that there might be a reason why they're trying to be a little bit more transparent with the numbers they're sharing now. I think Dwayne got into a little bit of trouble with sharing some of the Black Adam numbers that maybe were, it was like they were projections, they were like related to something else and sharing. So I think they're a little bit more focused on that. Paul, any thoughts about the TV schedule opening up here? And I'm going to find this last quote.
Well, with March Madness, of course, which is exactly what she's referring to, that with that out of the way, things open up a little bit. And, I think that the XFL is facing the same thing that the USFL did last year in that, because this is the first year, there are already some pre-existing broadcast commitments for ABC, for ESPN, for ESPN2, so you've had this kind of, they're trying to work around March Madness. They're trying to work around pre-existing commitments. They're trying to work around venue availability. So, okay, we're going to have Seattle on a cold Thursday night. So sometimes it's what's left. So, I think things do begin to open up a little bit then with March Madness coming to a close, and the league then has one of those variables taken out, and so that they can standardize or at least optimize some of those broadcast options.
Last quote here. This is kind of the big chunk. This will come out later as far as what these dates are, but we have our showcases. We have our future combine. We are planning our dates. As Dany Garcia, the first female owner of a major sports league. You remember Mike got nitpicky about the verbiage of that. I can't remember. It's like the first major professional sports league, majority owned. Absolutely. There will be a 2024 XFL football season. Johnson said their passion for the league dates back to when they were married and were doing the Player 54 and all that stuff. Paul, seeing that quote, or I guess I'll go to Andy first because we were just Andy, seeing the quote, there will be a 2024 XFL season. We already have our dates. Like Paul said, hopefully we can work around and not have Thursday night, 6:00 kickoff games at Lumen Field in Seattle. Just throwing it out there, random situations. But what do you make of this last chunk of quotes?
So what stone wall do we need to etch that into to make it permanent, right? Instead of it just because I think people will now hold that accountable, right? They're going to say, well, let's see if that actually happens. You can say it and it may not even happen. I'm sure AAF people, I'd have to go back and see if the AAF was talking about that too, because I can't remember if they were even thinking about a season 2 at that point with all their financial misgivings. But no, I mean, it's an affirmation, and I think it's an expected affirmation. That's something that I'm not too surprised about, in terms of, again, their long-term planning, in terms of the fact that they have this ahead of them. I do think there's a lot more internal planning as far as what's going to be done as far as marketing. Mike Mitchell came on a couple weeks ago and said that they'd spent $120,000 on marketing overall. So obviously that you would expect that number to go up, or at least be adjusted in terms of attracting more people. One thing I do want to say, before we move on, which I did notice a little bit, which was interesting, and this is sort of, again, that more long-term planning. I saw an advertisement at the stadium for the Frisco Fighters, which is the indoor football league team. Now, we all know that they have a partnership with the indoor football league in terms of player allotment and in terms of players having an opportunity to play in that league in case, for whatever reasons, they're not in the XFL. I thought that was interesting. I hadn't seen an advertisement for another league while being at that league's game. So I thought that's obviously part of, like, the long-term planning of getting these partnerships, getting these foundations in place, and sort of digging their feet into the soil. But I think that, again, the question is, all right, now how much water are you going to put on the plant as we go into season 2? That's really the biggest question.
Paul, they say this isn't a one and done. We're not just trying to expand the portfolio, make a little money. This is a passion project. Anything else on this? And then we'll get to the 3 games and we'll talk to some comments here. Anything else on this that you want to share?
It's what I like about the XFL is that they seem to be getting out in front of this. This is kind of the subtext of all the rating articles, is that, how much longer can the league possibly go on? And for them to get out in front of this and say, yeah, we anticipated it. we'll be back next year. Regardless of how things turn out, I think it's a very good move.
Yeah, Jared says having local events in the markets. I will say, and I was because again, whenever Vegas plays, you always get, and I get a lot of CFL people like, oh, the Vegas posse, and they had all this, and that was a million years ago. I don't think, and whatever, if we want to look at this as a trial run, season 1 or whatever, I do not think that they've gotten the juice was not worth the squeeze of what they could have potentially gotten in the local markets right now. Andy, you were at the Renegades game. Do you disagree? Like, I know, and that was the most attended, but like, we're doing all this circus act of flying everybody and flying it back at 10 in the morning and all this kind of stuff. Like, have they gotten the full picture of what they could have out of this season within the markets?
I mean, I think they could have done more promotional value, but again, that's not where they allocated the money. I will say I understand the hub concept. I understand it in full force now. Being in DFW and seeing how easy it is to travel back and forth from Arlington, I totally get it. It clicked for me when I was traveling there from when I flew in, and then when I was traveling around the greater Fort Worth area, which is massive. And I think there's still a lot of more space for them to advertise and be able to allocate resources to saying, hey, here are the Arlington Renegades. Here's the hub of the XFL. You didn't really get the sense that that event was even happening until you approach the stadium. So that's a big aspect of it, I think. But again, that's not what they were going to do this season. That is not their end goal. Their end goal was get people to games, get teams to the games, and get them there in one piece and have no hiccups along the way.
Paul, we're talking here. Ticket sales going up. Yeah, I think it was good attendance. I'll be curious. Audi Field tonight, just with the Monday night aspect of it. Are you looking forward to seeing the ESPN2 Monday Night Football game?
Absolutely. I mean, the atmosphere in DC has been tremendous, and that's kind of the additional layer that I think that the XFL has brought this year is that home game atmosphere has been really great, and we've talked about how it probably could have been better. This is not an argument against the hub concept, but even things such as having mascots and cheer teams, which would be locally based units that could be out during the week. And then maybe you fly AJ McCarron in or keep him an extra day so that he can attend some civic function. These are things that could be, you could stick with the hub concept and yet maximize kind of local impact and have these people out at local events and civic gatherings and parades and things just to continue to increase awareness of the team.
Yeah, I saw, I think Houston's done a really good job with that. I think their team in terms of getting, okay, we're going to go to the mayor's office. And I think they have like a city hall event. But I agree, and I talked with, President Russ Brandon there at the Arlington event at, where Andy was at Choctaw. And like, we're going to be in there early. We're going to be the first people in, the last people out. We're really going to use this. And, I do think they're doing the best they can. I think getting a lot of these people on board back a little bit earlier this season, I think would accrue dividends. I've said this before. I don't understand the order of events of hiring certain people and why we wanted directors of team operation in August and social media people in January. But I think obviously going into next year, I think they're learning you have to have more local presence than just day of, like, okay, what can we squeeze in one radio appearance and then get into the game, and then they're flying right out after. It's hard. I mean, and I get it. It's tremendous work. Can we, buy a hotel room? Can we fly them in Friday night, do some stuff and do it that way? Is that how we can mitigate that? Andy, any other thoughts on this? And we'll get to the games.
No, I absolutely agree. And that's the thing. I don't really remember there being any promotional events for the Renegades themselves, even though they're playing a home game. People who showed up there were in the know of, well, the teams exist and they played a couple of games here. Although it was interesting just overhearing people's general confusion of like, how many home games do they have left? Wait, how long has this been going on for? Like that we spend so much time in this space. We're so locked in that it's interesting when you start getting into that open space and realizing, oh, there's people who are not clearly as up to date or up to speed with all of this. And I don't expect them to, honestly. Again, this is an effort to be as involved with this as we have been. And I think a lot of that has to do with promotional material or lack thereof in terms of general knowledge of what's going on in terms of the players, in terms of the coaches, in terms of the overall mantra of the league. Again, it being new, but I can tell that there's definitely still some general catching up from the public that's going on here. So that's still really fascinating to me. And I think that will come with time. But I agree with you. They need to make sure that they lock in and do a lot of work in the off season. The off season is absolutely crucial for them to continue this momentum. And they can't just shut it down. They can't close the laptops after May 13th and be like, all right, that's it. No, they have to continue working at this because this is a long-term process. They're serious about keeping this league around. They have to do their work in the offseason. I know they will from a scouting standpoint, but from a promotional standpoint and community building standpoint, they must and they absolutely have to.
USFL, I think, really suffered from that. I mean, now, like it was like the second they showed back up at camp last week, like, okay, like we're tweeting, we're here. I thought they really, faltered there in the meantime. Let's go to the games here. We have 3 games. Obviously, we have the Monday night game tonight. Paul, you're kind of walking into a lover's spat between Andy and I, so I'm going to give you the floor first, and then we'll toss to Andy. But I want to make sure you get what you have to say on this. We had the thrilling 15-9 defensive scoring, winning Brahmas here against the Renegades. Paul, what did you make of this? And then Andy, you will have the floor, I promise.
The question that you come out of this game is how can a Bob Stoops coach team be struggling this much offensively? As you have an experienced quarterback in Kyle Sloter. Doesn't matter who you put in, whether it's Plitt or Sloter, they can't move the team consistently, and they certainly can't score. It's kind of mind-boggling to me. San Antonio, if you bring anything out of this game, okay, San Antonio, yes, they salvaged their season for at least another week or two. But at least they can say, hey, maybe if we get Kurt Benkert sometime, maybe something happens. What do you say if you're Arlington? You've tried Plitt. You've tried Sloter. What are you going to do next? You're going to have to rely on your defense, and your defense is probably going to have to score.
You got Kevin, Bob Stoops has Kevin Anderson there sitting at third quarterback. I don't know why we haven't seen that. Andy, let's get into this. I don't even know what you want to get into. So Andy's taking off. Shannon is taking off the glasses. Andy's going full heel here.
All right, listen here, Mareed. I got to defend my guy, Benkert. I get it. Not the greatest outing by him or by pass. I understand. But listen, he's my guy. The Benkert is I've loved him from day one. I've always been in his camp. I've always been in he's one of the funniest guys I've ever seen on social media from a player standpoint. He denounces Mike Florio left and right, which is one of my favorite online battles ever. I get it. I understand you have your qualms with him. You have your quibbles with Mr. Benkert, but I love this guy. I absolutely love him. I am blindly in love with him. Former Packer legend Kurt Benkert. Reed, you and I usually get along pretty amicably, but I'll tell you what, there was points where I wish I could have drawn out a sword yesterday when I was at Choctaw Stadium with you going off on him while I was just mercilessly sitting there and trying not to say anything.
And all of that affable social media attention and all of his followers equated to 1 of 6 for 2 yards. That was a tremendous outing. This is my thing, and I just want to make sure, because I do think that the anti-Kurt, God Kurt, or I think I'll call him God. What is it? Kurt Benkert. So it's God Kurt. No, Benkert, God Kurt. Does that make sense? I think this will permeate here. This is going to be an online storyline now, right? I'm feuding with Marshall Ferguson. Here's my problem with Kurt. Kurt was assigned to the teams, the official like XFL, post. We're assigning Kurt to the Roughnecks. He's going to be here. We're going to do all that stuff. This wasn't like Mike Mitchell, like, hey, I'm hearing that. This is the XFL, whatever. Kurt decided he didn't want to do it. He wanted to be with his family. He was done playing football, got the XFL, whatever. And so he posts like, I don't know what the deal is with these reports. Like, I'm going to be with my family. Like, sometimes there's more things more important than football. That's fine. But this, like, the league posted this. This wasn't, an errant account. Like, so then he comes out. Now they're struggling. He comes back in. Juwan Pass has been on the team since day one. Assigned quarterback, has gone through, lived in Arlington, lived through the Arlington ice storm, everything else. Is the starting quarterback of the game. Goes 8 of 14, 57 yards. Not great. Why does Kurt get credited with the win for this game? Paul, when has a starting quarterback not been credited with the win ever in the history of football?
Well, I guess Benkert was handing off late in the game, so he's like the closer, right?
But then
It's the
you get
same.
the
He's your relief
save.
pitcher
You
who
get
came
the
in.
save.
He finished things up.
I don't like this. I don't like that Kurt got the post ESPN game slot. I tweeted about it. I'm a Kurt fan. I think Kurt's a great guy.
You don't sound like a Kurt fan.
Well,
He's never been a Kurt fan.
I've
Paul.
never
Let me
been a
break it
Kurt
to you.
fan from the second I learned about him earlier this year. But no, that's my thing is I stand like when you earn my loyalty, like Andy, I would walk into traffic for you. I would defend you. But when you come out there, like I don't want to deal with this XFL. Like they're saying I'm part of this team. I don't even want to be. Okay, then you're out, right? Ask Mark Perry how that feels. Like you're out of the fold. Okay, you want to be in the fold. You want to be out of the fold. Kurt is out of the fold right now. Kurt needs to work his way back in. And in the post game, like, well, they called me up, and I said, well, what's the deal? What's going on? Yeah,
You've
please.
seen Jack Cohn play, right?
I have, and that's fine. Kurt might be a better quarterback. That's not the debate we're having here. But the debate is Kurt did play like crap. Kurt should not have gotten the post-game press conference. Juwan Pass has been on that team since the beginning, and I just wish that he had a little more recognition for the time that he's put in.
I agree with the last thing you said.
Okay. Andy, anything else on that? And then we can talk about the game.
I will just say his kneel downs are legendary. So I got to say he knows how to run a good victory formation. But yeah, I'm going to disengage here. But listen, I will say this. Now that we've watched, 4 different quarterbacks for the San Antonio Brahmas, if you combine all 4 of them, do you get a halfway decent quarterback? I'm sorry. This has been a miserable operation. I feel bad for Hines Ward. This has been awful. This has been awful to watch as far as their operation. They were able to yesterday. I mean, Jock Fitzpatrick finally was able to do some things. But before that, they were having a miserable time running the ball. And I can't understand how they're not able to use their receivers. That's the most baffling part to me. They have these tall, lanky receivers that they can throw to. Now, they don't have a lot of speed on the perimeter, but they at least have some maneuverability as far as throwing vertically. But man, seeing Juwan Pass just sky that end zone fade, I believe it's in the second quarter, and you heard Hines Ward just be like, "Man, you overthrew it. All right, send out the field goal." Like he's just almost like resigned to like dealing with this problem now. And it's funny you said, Paul, about how the Renegades needed to score a defensive touchdown to be in games. Well, that's exactly what San Antonio did, and that's exactly the difference is that they had a defensive touchdown. Also, this will be in my takeaways article. Really, the best player on offense for San Antonio is John Parker Romo. He's having an amazing season. He was money yesterday, just absolutely cool as a cucumber, and it was fantastic. But that can't be your saving grace on offense if your kicker is the best player and the most productive player on your offense. So it's really unfortunate. It's really kind of just baffling that it's not at least been a little bit better. They had that one breakout game against the Guardians, but since then it's just been absolutely miserable. And they'll just continue to go through this carousel until either it gets better or it's just going to stay the same way the rest of the season.
Yeah, Cole Kublak, who I think is coming on the show next week. He's asking because Parker Romo's wife was like in the crowd, like, so you just had a gender reveal. Like, what was more exciting, watching him kick a field goal or the gender reveal for your child? Like, really putting her on the spot there, Cole. Paul, yeah, it just the Hines Ward. They were asking him, okay, what's the deal with the quarterbacks? And he's like, yeah, we're looking for a spark. I mean, Bob Stoops was looking for it's this elusive spark for the Southern Division teams. What is going on with the San Antonio offense?
And that's what you look for with Benkert. I mean, that's really the deal. Yeah, one of 6, 2 yards. That's nothing to write home about. But it's what could be possible going forward. On the other side, hey, we tried both guys. It's just not working. And here, at least it's an option. This is a guy that the XFL wanted, on the field from day one. And now they've got him. He's going to have to learn a lot, and he's going to have to produce really fast. But it's at least something that we haven't seen. We've seen Jack Cohn. We've seen how he struggled back there. That's not working. The backup now is not an option because he has a broken foot. Juwan Pass, the passing seems to be something that he's going to have to work on. But Benkert's at least a possibility going forward. So if you look at both of these teams, and there's not a whole lot of difference, as Andy mentioned, between these teams. They're defense first, absolutely. Have struggled on offense. But Benkert's, kind of the question mark. Can they get something out of him over this last stretch?
Well, he's such a genius. He didn't even need time to look. He knew the playbook. It was so simple. Immediately, he was able to just to walk in. He was building sandcastles on Wednesday. I just don't like this like fawning. I just, XFL. What have we said on here? Like XFL, they're better than no player. We're not paying up. Okay, we gave Brent Huntley a little bit of money, but like we don't need to pay up for anybody. But we gotta get the post game with Kurt. Nah, I don't like that. I wish the XFL. It was like the WWE back in the day when WWE would have like. And I don't want to get political, but like, we're doing the cash giveaway. Like Donald Trump's going to be on the show. Like, Donald, we love you. Or like David Arquette's going to be on the show. Like, David, tell us about your time at WCW. Like, I think XFL can carry themselves better. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you're The Rock, damn it. Like, you don't need to like the F you care about Kurt Benkert here. Like, let's promote some other stuff. All right, let's go here. I think we've exhausted that. Rousing game here. We had, and I did watch this game in full. One of the first full games of the XFL season I was able to watch. Paul, any thoughts here on the absolute trouncing of the Vegas Vipers at home against the Battlehawks?
Well, after the Vipers get their first win, just looked like a team that should have still been winless. Just almost no defense. It's tempting to say, it's tempting to point out their offensive line, but you really have to save those criticisms for Orlando. They've got a lot of bad stuff going on there. And I think that Rod Woodson is still kind of learning the head coaching position as well. Luis Perez, numbers, he threw a couple of interceptions. The second one, he's trying to make something happen, and he had been absolutely brutalized on that drive. So I don't lay a whole lot at his feet solely anyway. Hundley may be their best option going forward. But Perez has acquitted himself fairly well behind a really shaky offensive line.
Andy, you love Luis Perez maybe more than I do. How did you think the Vipers fared here?
Are we sure the Orlando Guardians didn't swap bodies with them? Because it certainly looked like it during this game. But look, I said this again last week about Luis Perez. It was almost due time that he was going to turn back into a pumpkin, because that's what happens every time. He'll have an outstanding performance. He'll play well for 2 weeks, and then suddenly, boom, it's like he turns into another person and he has a poor performance. And then Brent Hundley, once again, mystery to us all, does play well, fairly well in his limited time. I'm kind of surprised he wasn't starting the game, to be honest, or at least didn't have more playing time. It's just it's just this like rotating door at quarterback for the Vipers. But yeah, just absolutely listless performance by them. It was, we only get one more game at Cashwood Field. You have one more, maybe then it's gone forever, because it's just, again, that's another operation that is just not working, period. It's really not. As far as the Battlehawks go, look, Adrian McCarron, he's your MVP front runner. He's been outstanding this season. He's completing almost 68% of his passes. He was outstanding in this game. He is hitting all of his receivers, even when Hakeem Butler's not available. Now, Darius Shepard, friend of the your show, Darius Shepard has been outstanding. They've been able to just utilize all their weapons on offense. They're running the ball consistently. They just seem like one of the most consistent operations in the league, I would say. From week to week, you pretty much know what you're getting with the Battlehawks. It's a lot of good effort. It's a lot of consistent effort on offense. It's a solid defense that's going to get you turnovers, which they did in this game. I really think that the St. Louis Battlehawks are really the most consistent operation in the league, and a lot of that has to do with Adrian McCarron. He has been outstanding. Even when he has a pick or a fumble at any point in the season, he is unflappable. He doesn't really get affected by it too much. He sort of has amnesia. I think that has a lot to do with his veteran experience, especially being so long in the NFL and knowing how to sort of measure himself against other players. This has been really good for the St. Louis, and they needed this bounce back after that demoralizing loss to DC. They needed the bounce back, and especially with the Sea Dragons winning, they have to keep pace in a very contentious North Division.
Is enough made that there's a Rod Smith on the Vegas team? I'm just kind of looking at the stat line here. Like, if I was Rod, I would utilize that a little bit. The other thing from this game, and I want to make sure we talk about it because I know that there were comm issues. I think there was a little bit of comm issues in the Arlington game as well, or was it? It was the Orlando game, one of the other games. But this was the big comms game where AJ McCarron was hearing He says he was hearing his defensive coach, which I don't know why the defensive coach would be talking while they're driving down. There were articles written that he was hearing the defensive calls, which I do not think would be possible. Paul, any thoughts on that? Like that AJ McCarron was able to script his own plays down the field, like hearing the other team's opposing calls the whole time?
It sure looked like he knew what was coming because he completed 19 in a row. He was lights out there for a while. Building on McCarron, I mean, he's a guy with big game experience in college. He's, been with an NFL team, and you just see that unflappability that, I'm going to turn the ball over every once in a while because I'm a quarterback. But I'm just going to bounce back and continue on with the next drive. I absolutely agree with Andy that outside of DC, this is the most poised, consistent unit in the league.
I don't know. I wish the storyline, I don't know. It was confusing to me. And I know that I think it was Brandon that was in the post game that was asking about that, in terms of like the comms and stuff. They need to get that figured out. Oh, it was because it was the ABC game. It was the one we'll talk about here too, that we didn't have the comms for the whole first half that we couldn't hear on the TV broadcast. Yeah. Andy, I mean, AJ, I think we've talked about this. I know Pat was on last week talking that, like AJ is more just playing for the love of the game and not like, oh my God, like if I do not complete this pass, like I'm never going to make it back to the NFL, which is a little bit more. Do you think that just gives him more calm? And is that something we need to think about here moving forward in the future of like, balancing the guys that, want to get a shot versus the ones like, like Brandon Silvers. Brandon Silvers is happy playing golf and, sitting in his truck and doing interviews on the Marcast and, being in the XFL right now.
I think it's buy-in. It's buy-in from the players and it's buy-in from obviously AJ McCarron. But again, I go back to that quote about Anthony Beck's talking about how if all the players went to the NFL next year, he would be happy. But again, getting the players to buy into now and being able to be part of this experience is incredibly important. And I truly believe that's what the Battlehawks are doing here. They seem to be bought in every single week. The game plans are always usually exquisite, especially on the offensive side. Even if they don't always go correctly, I think that they're always very well prepared. And I think that has a lot to do with the players being all on the same page. AJ, for sure, he seems to not only be playing for this league, he's obviously playing for his family. He's playing in front of his kids, his wife. He's been able to have another opportunity to really showcase his talents. And whether he goes back to the NFL, I'm not sure if he's overly concerned about that. Would that be nice? Sure. But I think he's having an absolute blast playing right now. And that's something that can't be lost on a lot of people, is just the fact that these players are able to get out there again. They're able to do something. They're able to have an impact in a game, which they may not have had in quite some time. Obviously, that was the case with your interview with Jeff Badette. Really stood out to me last week. Him just being healthy, just being able to play the game again. I mean, I'm sure he would love to get back to the NFL and get his first catch, but that I think right now he's so solely focused on being a part of this organization with Vegas. He's able to just play, just do something that he loves.
Two takeaways from the Jeff Badette interview. Really wants to be healthy and absolutely hated his time in the USFL. That was the two big takeaways I had from that. We're going to talk about the last game. I forgot to mention this. I did have a funny joke talking about the Brahmas. I want to figure out some sort of bet. I'm going to get this stat line tattooed somewhere on my body. We'll figure out the bet here, but I want to get the Kurt Benker 1 of 6 for 2 yards, which one pass above it here. For that. No, Andy shaking his head. I'm going to pull up the game stats for this. Paul, it got a little precarious here. I was split screening the Kraken's 7-2 win over the Nashville Predators. We're 8 points above them, 4th in the Pacific right now, in our wild card spot. But I was also watching the Dragons almost very much lose to the Orlando Guardians. So do you think that was going to be possible?
No. And the reason is, Orlando looks way better with Dormady at quarterback. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But to me, when you look at the Orlando Guardians, their offensive line and their defensive line look like they are so far behind the competition that they practically give Orlando no chance to win most days. The number of false starts and holding penalties alone on that offensive line is simply staggering. If Dormady shows anything, It's that he knows he has to get the ball out of his hand fast. And that, I think, is where he's succeeding, where Paxton Lynch didn't have terrible numbers, but he just would hold on to the ball too long behind that offensive line. On the other side of the ball, we saw Orlando get some pressure occasionally on Dany in the first half. That all dried up in the second half. He had forever back there. And if he can make some better decisions with the football, Seattle is going to be tough to stop down the stretch.
Andy, I think in our group chat, we've said, basically like Dany is, I don't laugh. Dany's like throwing away his NFL chances, like at any time he passes the ball. I mean, it's really like getting to that point. I don't want to be too harsh on, friend of the show, Ben Dany here, but what do you make of Gucci's performance?
I think he's just doing it just to see how much further away he can get it with Hazlitt, because I think that's still the ongoing battle of like, how many turnovers can I get before Hazlitt throws me under the bus? But I think no, it's odd that he turns it over at such a high frequency. And as Paul mentioned, I mean, he had all day to throw in the second half, and he still was not as consistent as you may have expected with that kind of protection in front of him. I mean, this offense is. It's all there for him. The skill position players, the offensive line, the play calling, everything is there for him to be tremendously successful. And while, yes, he is leading the league in passing yardage, it's still not maybe to the degree that other people were expecting at this point. And certainly I would think that he would have better numbers because of that. And to go back to a little bit to the Guardians, yeah, look, you can have more consistent play from Normandy. That's great. You run the ball with a lot more frequency. That's fantastic. You have 2 punts blocked in one game. That's inexcusable. You can't have that. Absolutely not. It's horrendous special teams gaffes. They finally were able to get a pick off Dany in the second quarter. That was their first turnover created since week 1. Like, they're not getting any turnovers. That's a huge detriment to your operation if you're not able to get any sort of pressure or any sort of turnovers. Like, you can't create opportunities for your offense. And that is a huge thorn in their side. And yeah, of course, it's been well documented. Their offensive line, it's unwatchable, honestly. Like, it's unbelievable. It's important how many penalties they get and how poorly they protect their quarterbacks. I feel bad for Normandy now, because I think he's actually, as Paul mentioned, he's doing the correct thing. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. But at that point, you can start to key in on those receivers. If you know that they have no time to develop their routes, you can just play everything underneath. So look, it's the same tale. We have to really start considering whether Orlando's going to win a game. And I can't believe we finally got to this point, but we really need to start thinking about that, because it's not looking good.
Paul, I'll ask you about that, and then I have a follow-up about Dany. First week of the season, I said, are the Guardians worse than the USFL Maulers? And Paul, people laughed in my face. They said, absolutely not. The Maulers are the worst team that's ever been in the history of all football. I ask you the question now, Paul, who is worse, the USFL Maulers under Kirby Wilson or the Orlando Guardians under Coach Terrell Buckley?
I'm still going to go with the Maulers.
Wow.
Even when they found something, they with Vad Lee leading the team for a win, it was all of a sudden he was tossed to the curb within a week. That was a bizarre operation. And, I was really critical of Terrell Buckley as a head coach in the early going. I thought that he was throwing his team under the bus. I thought that he was kind of losing emotional control a little bit on the sideline. And I've been a little bit more impressed with him going forward. I still think his lines are awful. And the special teams play there, as Andy mentioned, no excuse for what happened there. But I think that he showed some self-awareness and realized that he was overly critical to begin with. And he's turned that around a little bit. And just having the guts to make the call, and we need to sit Paxton Lynch and we need to go back to Normandy, which could have been disastrous given kind of the history with Normandy and the allegations against him. That could have been, awful. And yet they have managed to play, despite, 2 terrible lines. They've managed to play 2 consecutive competitive games. Gives you a little bit of hope, but they've got to get those lines figured out. The turnovers are a direct consequence of inconsistent to no pressure on the quarterback. And their offensive line play puts them behind the down and distance markers time and time again, and they just cannot survive that.
Yeah, and I wanted to say real quick, going off what you were saying about not having Paxton Lynch in the game, they didn't even activate him, and same with Quentin Flowers. That was a really interesting move we discussed in our group before the game started. It was just the fact that was such a line in the sand that was drawn by Buckley saying, no, we're going to stick with Dormady and Francois, and that's the end of the story. Not this, merry-go-round of 3 or 4 different guys to see which one works out. He clearly threw his weight behind Dormady. We'll continue to do it forward. We'll see. But Dormady, and for my money, has looked the best out of all of them, and he looked fantastic in Vegas. He had really kind of almost an immaculate game. People didn't want to talk about it because it's the Guardians, they're winless, but he was outstanding in that game, and I think he would have had better numbers here again if his offensive line just gave him more than 2 seconds to get rid of the ball, which we can talk about it as well. As I think across the league, there's some really inconsistent lines. I saw a lot of bad line play yesterday in Arlington between them and San Antonio. So they're not too far ahead of Orlando, but Orlando is definitely the gold standard of poor line play so far.
Yeah, if you know anything about the Quentin Dormady situation, him being on the roster just with Francois here going into the game is interesting, to be sure. That's the thing for me. We'll wrap up here. Andy and Paul got timeouts here. I appreciate your guys' time this morning. The thought that Quentin Dormady has gone through all he's gone through this year and is still coming. That's why, when I talk with players on the show, I'm always so appreciative because I'm like, you're coming off of practice or you just got out of the shower and you got to go eat and you're trying to go lift. You're doing all this stuff. And to think that Dormady has hiring a lawyer and, dealing with all this stuff and talking with the XFL and talking with the team and, has played as well as he have is just a testament. Paul, anything else on Dormady?
The Russ Brandon made a comment in Orlando during a press conference that the XFL was going to be kind of this player first league. And I think they really showed it in the Dormady situation. That is not old school football. Old school football is we cut you for any reason, and there is no recourse. And yet Dormady was able to air his case before the league. They found that, this was unjustified. And they reinstated him. And that could have created a very tense, uncomfortable situation in Orlando. Let's get him out of town. Let's trade him. Full props to Buckley for realizing, you know what? He's back on the team. He's our best chance. I'm putting him in. And I think we see some shades of what Brandon said too with the Benkert situation where he's not going to Houston. He doesn't want to be there for whatever reason. But we want him in the league. How can we make this happen? And that's what they did.
The last question I had, and then we'll get out of here. We were talking to Nucci. We had a comment about, him have a prime example needing more than the year. I think Danucci came in and thought, I'm going to run circles around this. I'm going to be out of here. I play for the Cowboys. I'm good. Is the XFL maybe more challenging than Danucci thought? Is he not as good as he thought? How do you read that, Andy? And I don't see Danucci walking back on next year. Does he come back to the XFL? Is this kind of one and done for him? What do you make of just that player mentality?
I think he needs another year, honestly. I think he still needs another year to play and develop because there is something there. His arm strength, at times, he's made some very impressive throws. And I think he's been able to work really well with a really good receiver skill set, obviously. Ja'Cour Pearson's leading the league in receptions and yards. That's fantastic. Josh Gordon has disappeared a little bit, but he's utilized him pretty well. And I think this has been a pretty nice little set for him to use. But he just needs another year. He needs time to develop. He needs more reps. He needs more practice. He needs to be able to not just fold or just fall into these bad habits that he has. That game you went to against Houston, that was awful. Those 3 interceptions were terrible. And if he hadn't thrown those, I think they would have blown Houston out of the building. So that's something that he has to work on personally. And that's not going to show well on the tape, obviously, when he goes in the camps and everyone says, well, what about this? What happened here? And that's going to be a talking point for a lot of teams. So I still think he needs to develop a little bit more. I do think he has the talent. I think he's actually fully capable of being a serviceable quarterback. He just needs to get over these terrible habits, which, look, sometimes that takes a while to iron out of your game. I'm sure there are plenty of quarterbacks like AJ McCarron probably would have been the same way 8 years ago. I think he could have been the same way in that vein. So it takes time with some of these guys, longer than maybe others expect.
Well, I really appreciate everyone's time today. Just a reminder, like and subscribe. Trying to get up to 3,500 subscribers. Big show Friday. I have Austin Karp coming on from the Sports Business Journal. He did a big TV ratings analysis like last week, and we can talk here about XFL returning, kind of get his thoughts on that. We have Eric McLean coming on. He's one of the sideline reporters, as well as Greg Parks with XFL Board joining us. And then I have Paul Woods, another Paul joining us. Paul's at Argos historian. Paul was just down in Birmingham talking with McCall Bethel-Thompson and kind of all of that. So we'll talk about the transition from the CFL to the USFL, everything else with that. And I got an email about some player interviews today. Paul Reeths, I appreciate you joining us. Anything else from you today? OurSportsCentral.com, StatsCrew.com. Anything else you want to say before you get out of here? I appreciate you hopping on.
We talked a lot about the improvements that the 6 teams that have already played could make. What we didn't talk about is, tonight's game, and there's 2 really, really good teams, solid on both sides of the ball. So it feels like it was a little bit, here's how these teams are improved, here's the weaknesses, but we have the 2 best teams in the league facing off tonight. A lot of strengths on both of those teams.
Andy, are you looking forward to? Did you? And I don't know, Paul. I enjoyed my Brandon Silvers interview. I hope people enjoy that. Andy, are you excited to see the Spring League gunslinger here tonight going into Audi Field?
I am. I think Houston may get into a little bit of trouble with this DC team. Like, this DC operation is, as Paul mentioned earlier, is the most consistent operation in the entire league. They just know how to finish games. When they get a lead in the second half, they put their foot on your throat and they pound you into submission. And I think for Houston, look, John Trey Kirkland is a huge weapon. That's a big miss for them. For them to have that injury with him and he'll be out the rest of the season, they have to find a way to replace that production. Now, maybe Justin Smith comes in, does a great job. Deontay Burton steps up. All the other receivers come in and contribute, but I think it's going to take some adjustments, and AJ Smith is going to have to find a way to adjust around that as well. Maybe even running the ball a little bit more consistently. I know they don't like to do that in that offense, but they might have to, especially going down the stretch. This might be a little bit of a rough stretch for the Roughnecks because DC is firing on all cylinders. They're playing at home. The Beer Snake is undefeated. That's the last historical streak in play here. The Beer Snake is undefeated, and maybe Houston can spoil that party, but I think it's going to be another coordination for the defenders. I am looking forward to the game, but it's going to be really interesting tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle killed Houston when it came to the turnover battles and everything else here at Louisville. I'm like, what the hell what is DC going to do if Seattle did that? Paul, give you last words, and then we'll get out of here. I appreciate you guys. And this was a fun one today. I got to yell about Kurt Benkert. I got to talk about XFL Season 2. Successful day here.
Have really enjoyed this XFL season. The close games, compelling. The pace of play has been really good. We're looking at some offensive improvements going down the stretch with a lot of teams, but we have 2 great teams facing off tonight. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how this unfolds over the final month of the season.
It's going to be good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate everyone checking it out today. We got a little breaking news, and it's good. I like this Monday morning if anything comes out, but I appreciate Andy as always. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.